Hello, this is a quick tutorial on how to determine the domain and range from a graph. Um, the domain is always your x values and your range is always your y values. So let's look at a quick graph. I'm not really good at drawing on this board, so bear with me. So let's say I have a straight line. I have arrows here. And that means that the line is going to keep going and going and going. So to figure out the domain, we would look at all the x values. So as you can see, there's an x for each one. This is the x here. This is the x. This is the y. So no matter what point I pick on this line, it's always going to have an x value. Same thing here. No matter what point I pick, there is always going to be an x value. Okay? So this line keeps going and going and going, so therefore the x's will keep going and going and going. So the domain will be from negative infinity to positive infinity. You always read the domain from left to right. So if you're going to read this graph, you would read it starting here, which will be negative infinity all the way down, going out for the x values to positive infinity. Now to figure out the range, your range goes up and down. So no matter where we are on this graph, you are always going to have a y value. Okay, so no matter so so you have a corresponding x and a corresponding y. So as long as this line keeps going and going and going, so will your y values. So your range will be from negative infinity to infinity. All right, let's do um, another graph. Let's say you have a U shape. Okay? A U-shaped graph. Now this graph is a little different. And to figure out the domain, um, as you can see, this graph is going to keep going and going and going and going and going. You can't tell because it's not, you can't see it visually, but that's why you have the arrows. So the arrows are going to keep going out, 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 out. So no matter where on that graph, you will always have an x value. Okay, so it's always going to hit, you're always going to have an x value. Okay, so usually with graphs like this that's U-shaped, or if it's an upside down U, your domain is always going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. Now the range is a little different. If we look at the range, or if we look at the y, this graph's point, lowest point on this y, is here. I'm not sure what point this is. We can call it 0, -3. I'm just guessing what it is. Okay. So this is my lowest point, and it keeps going up, 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 up. So the lowest point is where we're going to start at, -3, all the way out into infinity. Okay, so with U-shaped graphs, you usually have a domain of negative infinity to infinity. The range is the lowest point all the way out into infinity. Now, if you had an upside down graph, let's say this point here is 0.04. Once again, your domain is going to be from negative infinity to infinity. Your range is going to be, you're going to start from the bottom and you're going to go all the way up to the highest point. So if you start at the bottom, you're starting at negative infinity, you're going to go to the highest point. Remember, we're only looking at the y value, so we'll go all the way from negative infinity to 4. So for this particular chapter, this is how you figure out the domain and range. You basically pretty much have to draw a picture to help you visualize. Hope this helps.